Hi everyone, welcome to the video on insulin adjustment. In this video, we're going to teach you how to adjust your insulin at home. This video applies to you if you're taking Basal plus insulin regimen. If you're not sure what that means, sit with us with your prescription and we'll tell you if this is the insulin video you need to watch. So basically, you need to be on one dose of basal insulin per day, either in the morning or night, one dose of short acting insulin or a bolus insulin with one of few meals. So either breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you're taking a short acting insulin and you're taking a basal insulin once a day. Sit with us if you're not sure which video to watch. So let's get back to school, go over some math, and see how to adjust insulin at home. We hope you find this video useful. At the end of this, if you still have doubts, we're happy to sit with you once again. Bye bye and have fun.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the video on basal plus insulin titration. So if you're wondering, is this the right video for me? And am I supposed to watch this and learn how to adjust insulin? Well, let me first tell you if you need to watch this video or not. So if you're taking a basal insulin once a day, either morning or night, and a short acting or a bolus or a mealtime insulin once a day, which may be before breakfast, before lunch, or before dinner, then this is the video for you. So if you're taking some other injection, or if you're taking multiple injections a day, this is probably not the video for you. But if you're not sure about which insulin adjustment video you need to watch, sit with us and we can explain this to you in person. So what do we mean by short-acting insulin? We'll come to that in the next couple of slides. So these are the common short-acting insulins or mealtime insulins that are available in the market today. So you could be taking Actrapid or Insuginar or Huminsulinar, Insulin Rapid, Nova Rapid, Fiasp, Apidra, Humalog, or Reglucent Rapid. So if you're taking one of these injections with one meal, then this is the plus part of the basal plus regimen. And you're also going to be on a basal insulin as well once a day. So these are the common basal insulins that we use: Lantus, Basalog, Basaglar, Tresiba, and Toujin. So if you're taking a basal insulin once a day and a short-acting insulin with one meal, then this is the video that you need to watch to learn how to adjust insulin at home. So when should you inject your insulin? Now this is slightly different for the mealtime or the short-acting insulin and slightly different for the basal insulin. So we look at the mealtime injections first. This again depends upon which insulin you're taking. As I mentioned, there are several brands available. Some are human insulin, some are analog insulins. So some insulins need to be taken half an hour before eating, and some need to be taken 15 minutes before eating. Some newer insulins, like the faster aspart, can be taken even just before food or even after completing the meal. So it really depends upon which insulin you're taking. So what you need to do is check with the doctor, sit with your prescription, ask them when you need to inject the insulin, and follow the same. Some of you may be asked to take the short-acting insulin before breakfast. Some of you may be asked to take it before lunch. Some of you before dinner. But either way, it's usually one short-acting insulin injection before one of the three meals. So stick to what your prescription tells you. Coming to the basal insulin, again, stick to your prescription. Basal insulin is given once a day. It can be taken either in the night or it can be taken in the morning. Some of them need to be taken at the same time daily. So some people even may prefer to take it at 12 noon every day. Some of the newer basal insulins can actually be taken within a flexible time period. Some can be taken within a 6-hour window period. So anytime morning 6 a.m. to 12 noon or 12 noon to 6 p.m. There are some insulins which can be really taken at any time. So one day morning, one day evening, next day back to afternoon. The timing of the injection depends upon which particular insulin you're taking. So sit with the doctor and find out when you need to inject your insulin, because it varies based on the type of insulin you have been prescribed. So how does your insulin work? We look at the short-acting component first. So a short-acting or a mealtime insulin is taken before the food. If you're asked to take it half an hour before the food, please do so. So in this case, you see that after you take the injection, the insulin doesn't work immediately. It takes about half an hour to start working. Then if you've taken it before breakfast, the insulin levels gradually go up. The peak of the insulin coincides with your sugars after breakfast, so it controls your after breakfast sugars, and then gradually the insulin levels come down. What happens when you take the basal insulin? Basal insulin, irrespective of when you're taking it, morning or night, this works for 24 hours. Make sure that your body is getting some amount of insulin throughout the day. Your short-acting or mealtime insulin controls your post-breakfast blood sugars, and the basal insulin controls your fasting blood sugars. Therefore, we use the fasting blood sugar and the postprandial blood sugar to adjust our insulin at home. The duration of action of insulins may slightly again vary depending on which insulin you're taking. For short-acting insulins, the duration is approximately 6 hours. For some of the older insulins, it can be an hour or so longer. Some of the newer ones, it can be an hour or so lesser. But remember that approximately it's 6 hours, and irrespective of the exact duration, the way you adjust insulin remains the same because your short-acting insulin controls your post-breakfast blood sugar. Coming to the basal insulin, now some of the insulins like glargine, they work for 24 hours, but some of the newer basal insulins work for much longer. So the duration of action can slightly change depending on which basal insulin you're taking. But either way, the way you adjust insulin is the same. We adjust the basal insulin to control the fasting blood sugar. We adjust the short-acting insulin to control the after breakfast blood sugar. If you're taking the short-acting insulin here with lunch, instead of checking post-breakfast, check the sugars after lunch to adjust the dose of insulin. So which sugars should you check? We want you to check the fasting and the post-breakfast blood sugar, so 1.5 hours after meal. If your short-acting insulin is being taken with lunch, if that's what the doctor asked you to take, check your after lunch blood sugars. If they've asked you to take the short-acting insulin here with dinner, then check your after dinner blood sugars. So whichever meal you have been asked to take the short-acting insulin with, check the sugars 1.5 hours after that meal, and also check your fasting blood sugars. Check at any time when you have a low blood sugar, of course, because we want to make sure that we actually have a low. Then we correct the low sugar by having 3-4 spoons of glucose and a snack. We recheck after 15 minutes to make sure the sugars are normal again. In this example, we've asked you to take the short-acting insulin before breakfast and the basal insulin at night. In this case, we would want you to check your fasting and post-breakfast blood sugars at least twice a week. The more you check, the better it is. So you can check even every alternate day or even daily. That's acceptable and that would be excellent. We also want you to check your sugars after the other meals, after lunch, after dinner, 2 or 3 a.m. early in the morning, just to make sure that our sugars are under control at other times of the day as well. So what are the normal blood sugar values? We want our fasting blood sugar to be between 71 and 120. And we want the sugars after our food, which is after breakfast or after lunch or after dinner. So after meal, we want the sugars to be under 180. So fasting more than 120 is high. A post-meal blood sugar more than 180 is high. At any point of time, 70 or below 70 is a low sugar. So how do we adjust insulin? So when we check our fasting blood sugar, remember that the only insulin that is acting at that point of time is your basal insulin, because this works the whole day. So to control the fasting blood sugar, we adjust the basal insulin dose. If our fasting blood sugar is normal, it means the amount of basal insulin we're taking is sufficient. We continue the same dose. If the fasting blood sugar is more than 120, it means the amount of basal insulin we've taken is not enough. So we add 2 units to the current dose. If our fasting blood sugar is low, if you have a low sugar below 70 less or 70, or even the low at any other time in the night, let's say, then that means the amount of basal insulin that you've taken is actually a little more. So we reduce the insulin dose by 2 units. To control the post-breakfast blood sugars, we adjust the morning dose of short-acting insulin. So if the PPBS is normal, under 180, it means the amount of insulin we've taken before breakfast is sufficient for us. If the PPBS is high, more than 180, it means the amount of insulin we've taken is not enough, so we increase the dose by 2 units. If we have a low sugar between breakfast and lunch, so remember the short-acting insulin works for about 6 hours. So low sugar during this time, between breakfast and lunch, then we reduce the dose of the short-acting or the mealtime insulin by 2 units. So let's look at getting the fasting blood sugar under control first. So we always want to fix the fasting first and then look at the blood sugars after the other meals. So if your fasting blood sugar is normal, between 71 and 120, don't change the dose of your basal insulin. Keep it as it is. It means the amount of basal insulin you've taken previous day is sufficient for you. If your fasting blood sugar is more than 120, means the amount of basal insulin you've taken is not enough. So if you're taking 12 units, increase by 2 will become 14 units. If you have a low sugar, either fasting, through the night, or even at any other time, let's say between lunch and dinner, because these are all the times that your basal insulin is working, reduce your basal insulin by 2 units. So if you're taking 20, don't skip the insulin or don't reduce it by half, take 18 instead. To control the post-breakfast blood sugar, we adjust the dose of the morning insulin. So if your PPBS is normal, that means the amount of insulin is sufficient, continue the same dose. If your PPBS is high, let's say it's 200, the amount of insulin you've taken is not enough. So if you're taking, let's say 10 units of short-acting insulin with breakfast, PPBS is 200, you've already taken the insulin that day, but the next day, increase your insulin dose by 2 units. If you have a low sugar between your breakfast and lunch, remember the short-acting insulin works for about 6 hours. So if you have a low sugar in that time, then reduce the morning insulin dose by 2 units. So if you have a low sugar at 11 a.m. or 12 p.m., what you do is you correct the low sugar and the next day, reduce the morning insulin dose by 2 units. So don't skip insulin if you have a low sugar. If you have a low sugar between breakfast and lunch, reduce your morning injection by 2 units. But if you have a low sugar at any other time, let's say after lunch, evening, after dinner, through the night, early morning, it's your basal insulin acting at that time. So reduce your basal insulin by 2 units. So let's actually take some examples. So we've asked you to take 10 units of short-acting insulin with breakfast, and you're taking 30 units of basal insulin at bedtime. So these are the sugars. Fasting is 160. After breakfast, it's 260. So since the fasting is more than 120, it means the basal insulin is still not enough for us. The insulin taken at night is not enough for us. So instead of 30, we increase the night dose to 32. After breakfast, even with 10 units, our postprandial sugars are 260. When the postprandial sugars are more than 180, it means the morning injection is still not enough for us. So we increase 10 plus 2, it becomes 12 units. We check again. The fasting sugar is 130. After breakfast, it is 200. So what do we do here? Both the fasting and the postprandial is high. So to control the fasting, basal insulin night dose goes up from 32 to 34. Postprandial is 200. To control that, we increase the morning dose of short-acting insulin from 12 plus 2, it becomes 14. After 2 days again, the fasting blood sugar is 118, and after breakfast, it is 190. Now, the fasting blood sugar is under control. This means the amount of basal insulin we've taken is enough. So 34 continues as 34. We don't reduce the insulin dose when the sugars are normal, so remember that. After breakfast is more, therefore the morning insulin dose 14 plus 2 becomes 16. We check again, fasting is 90, after breakfast is 170. So both the values are in the target range. So we don't change the insulin dose. We continue 16 with breakfast, and the basal insulin we continue 34 in the night. We check again after 2 days. The fasting is 80. So the basal insulin dose continues as it is because the basal insulin controls our fasting blood sugar. But post breakfast, it has gone up a little bit now. So what do? Morning short acting insulin, 16 plus 2 becomes 18. We check again, it is 60, and after breakfast, it is 140. So when we have the low, we correct the hypoglycemia, we take glucose, we recheck, we make sure it's normal. We don't skip the morning insulin or we don't reduce the morning insulin. What controls your fasting blood sugar is the basal insulin. So we reduce the basal insulin, 34 minus 2, it becomes 32 units. After breakfast is normal, so the morning dose of short acting insulin 18 is sufficient. So we continue 18 as it is. We check again. Fasting is now normal 96. So basal insulin we continue 32. After breakfast is also normal 120. So we're quite happy. But the same day in the afternoon at 1 o'clock we have a low sugar. It is 70. So we correct the hypoglycemia, and every time you have a low sugar, look at the time. So remember, our morning short-acting insulin works till lunch. So if you've had a hypoglycemia just before lunch or around lunchtime, reduce your morning dose of insulin by 2 units the next day. So 18 minus 2, that becomes 60. So this goes on. So even when we start insulin, there is no exact dose of insulin for anyone. So we always start with a slightly lower dose, and then the dose goes up when you check the sugars at home. So titration of insulin dose is very, very important to come under control. Once we come under control, we more or less need the same dose, plus or minus 2 to 4 units, because remember, our blood sugars are changing constantly day-to-day basis. Even if your food, your exercise, your physical activity, sleep, even if all of that is constant, stress can make your sugars slightly vary, hormonal changes can make it vary, and even if that is all constant, there can be a day-to-day variation in every single person because insulin absorption may also slightly vary. Hence, it is important for us to check our sugars at home and to ensure that we are under good control. It is only when we do this as often as possible that we can stay within the normal range of blood sugar values. Some of you may be asked to take the short-acting insulin or the mealtime or bolus insulin with lunch instead of breakfast. Use the same principles that we have explained so far, but instead of looking at after breakfast values, look at the after lunch values to adjust the dose of your short-acting insulin. In this case, you would check your fasting blood sugar and after lunch blood sugar at least twice a week, but also check your post-breakfast, post-dinner, early morning, also once in a week or once in 10 days. You adjust your basal insulin to control the fasting blood sugar and adjust the short-acting insulin taken with lunch to control the after-lunch blood sugar. If you've been asked to take the short-acting insulin with dinner, again use the same principles, but you check your after-dinner blood sugar. In order to learn how to adjust 3 injections a day, you can watch the video on 3 times daily insulin and apply the principles taught there to adjust the doses, or you could sit with us individually. So coming to some important pointers, let's keep in mind that everyone requires a different dose of insulin. The dose that you take is very different from what your friend in the park takes, what your relative or neighbor takes. You might need 50 units of insulin per day. Someone else may require 10. Someone else may require 150 to 200 units per day. So there's nothing like a maximum dose of insulin. The amount of insulin that you need to get to your normal blood sugar target is the insulin dose for you, which is why we ask you to keep increasing your insulin dose at home every 2 to 3 days until you reach your normal blood sugar target. So do not worry as the dose goes up because no one knows what your correct dose is. A starting dose is just that, it's a starting dose. The dose goes up until you get to your goal. Everyone's blood sugar targets slightly vary. In this video, we've said that we want the fasting blood sugar under 120 and post-meal under 180. But this may be slightly different. For someone very young, we may want the fasting under 100. post meal under 160 or sometimes even under 140. For someone older, we may want to actually relax these targets. So sit with us and find out what your exact targets are. You can use the same guidelines once you know your targets and adjust insulin at home. The targets pregnant women and those planning pregnancy are completely different. We're actually very strict in these individuals. So if you're pregnant, sit with us and we'll sit with you one on one and go over what you need to do. The bottom line is it is only insulin adjustment that will help you reach your goals. So once you reach your target, again, we need to continue insulin adjustment in order to make sure that we stay within range, because the longer the time we spend in the normal range of blood sugars, it means the healthier we are. So good luck adjusting insulin at home, and let's start adjusting insulin today.